Hello, it's Laurie, and I'm taking you through the AQA A-level paper, A2 paper, and looking at paper one, primarily section C today, which is comparing texts. I'm using Room with a View, Great Gatsby, and two other poems. It's a 1 hour question, and the other two questions that you'd have done just beforehand would have been the Othello question if you're doing this syllabus, and that's a 1 hour question, or whatever text on Shakespeare you've chosen. And the section B is the unseen poetry question, which is also 1 hour. And then you move on to section C, 1 hour again. It's a 3 hour marathon. You don't have to do them in that order, but I recommend you do, because with Othello, you know exactly what you're going to get. You're going to get a passage from the play. And with unseen poetry, I suppose that's the wild card. You don't know what you're going to get on that. You might want to leave that till last. But section C, you've already chosen whether you're going to specialize in, well, very likely The Great Gatsby or Room with a View or Rebecca, or whatever text you're studying at A level. I'm going to take you through the section C question and just show you the sort of things that are expected. Okay, just in a few slides and in the next 10 or 15 minutes. Okay, here we go. All right, so the two questions used in this exemplar from the AQA are from the 2017 paper. And you can see there's two questions here. And the only things you need to focus on is that specific part of the question, which in question 6 there, you'll notice says aspects of desire. Compare how the authors of two texts you've studied present aspects of desire. Two texts, that means whatever written text you're studying, like Great Gatsby or Rebecca, and the other text is the pre-1900 collection of 14 poems. That's the other text. So when they say two texts, they mean the pre-1900 poems and whatever fiction text you chose, okay? So in the case I'm looking at, it'll probably be Great Gatsby and the pre-1900 poems. You must write about at least two poems. Yeah. All right. It says that in every question. So the only thing really to put a ring around is aspects of desire. Present aspects of desire. The other question 7 below, is ideas about romantic commitment. Ideas about romantic commitment. All right. Well, I'm going to go with aspects of desire to start with. All right, aspects of desire. And let's think about it with, let's say, Great Gatsby, aspects of desire. Who has desire in Great Gatsby? Well, Gatsby does. In fact, he's got so much desire for Daisy, he makes himself into a millionaire through bootlegging alcohol and buys himself a giant mansion to impress her. Is he trying to just step up the social scale? Or is he really in love with Daisy? Does he desire social status, or does he desire Daisy? Can't really be sure. What about the other desires in the book? Desire of Jordan for Nick Carraway, desire of Nick Carraway for social status, perhaps. And then, of course, he finds it repugnant towards the end. So there's plenty of desire going on in this novel, and that's the first thing I would consider. And the text, you could think about aspects of desire in the poetry, rather. There's plenty of desire in the poetry, isn't there? The flea, very clear metaphysical desire, man for the woman. Um, to his coin mistress, sexual desire. uh, Desire for an inappropriate other in Nunquam Non Sulis, desire for the ephemeral fairy-like woman in La Belle Dame Sans Merci, desire for the unattainable in She Walks in Beauty, the desire for the unattainable in Whoso Lists to Hunt, because she's run off with Henry VIII. So, there's plenty of areas you could go. Let's move on. Let's go with it. All right. So, very quickly, the starter I would give to the class would be remind yourself how you might answer this, or how you're going to go about it. Well, I would start with an introduction. Okay. Would you tackle them individually or at the same time? I would try to go into detail. I wouldn't skip around too much. I personally would start with an introductory paragraph summing them all up. I would then move on to The Great Gatsby specifically. I would try and link that with one of the poems and link that further with the third poem. So I might do a 2 or 3 paragraphs on each text and then try to conclude by summing them all up together. But I would need to be comparing them as I went. That's your AO4. And let's think about the connections you're going to make. Okay. All right. Well, let's think about this. So, the exemplar they've used is Jane Eyre, but it doesn't matter. You don't have to be studying Jane Eyre to see the techniques. Okay. My class would have been doing Great Gatsby or Room with a View or Rebecca. But it's about how authors present aspects of desire. Have a read through of it. Think about what's good and what is missing. Give yourself 5 or 10 minutes on it and try to award it a mark. See what you think. Okay, there is the text. This text is available online, but I'll leave it up there. You freeze the frame if you want and have a read through. Okay, once you've done that, move on to the next slide. Okay, here I am. Okay, so I've now separated the text up, and as you can see, the right of the page in my scribbled handwriting, I've come up with the assess and objectives, just to remind you. Okay, so AO1, is it well written and easy to follow? In other words, well structured with good terminology. AO2, has it talked about the writer's methods? Okay, in all of them, imagery. But don't forget to think about the methods, the meter. Okay, AO3. You've got to talk about the biographical details behind these, if they're relevant to aspects of desire. AO4, well, that's easy. You're comparing them as you go. And AO5, try and make a clear debate. Don't just go for, well, this is what the writer's saying, that's it. That will be prevalent later on. Okay, so just have a look through there. As you can see in the first paragraph, the student has gone for a kind of summing them all up in one paragraph to start with, and that's great. We've just sort of like talked about Jane Eyre, battles with passion and reason, heaven and earth, and then the poet William Blake, Garden of Love, blames religion for curbing the development of passion and love. Okay, that's an interesting take on it, curbing the development of passion, which is obviously aspects of desire. Whereas John Donne's narrator in The Flea attempts to exploit women as the inferior gender to quench his own sexual lust. That's only one interpretation. So already alarm bells ringing there. Don't try and just sum up as it black or white. Don't forget, The Flea is written by John Donne. The speaker is not John Donne necessarily. Okay? Don't forget, in The Flea, the speaker mucks up, really. The woman squashes the flea and sort of pokes fun at him. John Donne's poking fun at the speaker. So be careful about thinking the poet is the speaker. All right, but it's a good introductory paragraph that attempts to sum up everything that's going on. Just I don't like what they've said about the flea there. Okay, second paragraph, Garden of Love. So we want to go into detail here. Don't forget, this is 2 years' work here on pre-1900 poetry. You've got to say everything, okay, that's relevant to the question, obviously. So we get some specific references to detail. A chapel built in the midst where I used to play on the green, okay, good quotations. Ideal natural garden, man-made structure is built, a chapel's gates, a negative anti-church statement through the repetition of thou shalt not. Religion is seen as restrictive. Yeah, that's not much really on the Garden of Love. What about the Garden of Eden, which it seems like it's Edenic, isn't it? The whole garden until that chapel is plonked on it. Don't forget, William Blake wasn't sent to a normal school. He believed he was of Swedenborgian, which is a kind of a different aspect of Christianity. And he had a kind of an alternative view. He felt that religion very much was man-made. He believed in God, most certainly, but he believed in a kind of giving God, not a kind of the man, what he felt was the man-made damnation sort of um, judgmental God necessarily. So what he's saying is that you got that natural Garden of Eden, which has a natural love of God, but man-made churches and chapels being plonked down in the middle of it, killing it off. What about mention of the meter? Okay, we need more examples from the text, where people are walking around um, with briars, beating themselves, and sort of imagery of gravestones, and the gates are shut and thou shalt not. So there's more to say about the Garden of Love, and I'd make that a couple of paragraphs, to be honest. But they do link it to Jane Eyre, well done, and that's a good connection, AO4, right? Third paragraph, great deal of good, hypocritically as preaching of the Bible. So good connection with Jane Eyre and the Garden of Love, suppressing passion through religion, okay? A black pillar, okay, and immediately begins to criticize Jane's behavior. So good references to text, third paragraph. Fourth paragraph, Bertha Mason symbolizes the extreme of Jane's passion, right? Good example again. So, you don't need to have studied Jane Eyre to see that this student is specifically referencing the text, and good on them for that, okay? That's the writer's methods. Bertha Mason represents exoticism, element of sexual desire, and that's good. Okay, so moving on to the fifth paragraph. In contrast to Jane's suppression of passion, the narrator of the flea. So we move on to the flea in this paragraph, given desire in the carpe diem style. Well, that's great. He's a metaphysical, but there's aspects of the cavalier, isn't there, in this poem? So carpe diem, seize the day, is a good thing to bring in. In contrast to Blake, AO4, metaphysical uses long extended abstract metaphors, good, it's AO2, elements of philosophical wit. Don uses the central image of the flea as a basis for the narrator's logical argument for sex. Yeah, don't forget, it's the speaker, not Donne necessarily. And then it describes how this poem works. The blood, bodily fluids all mingled together. Give up her purity and virginity. The narrator, okay, good. Uses the image of the marriage bed in an attempt to legitimize his argument. He also uses a satirical tone with the religious imagery. Yeah, but no mention of meter. Why not? Cloister, good imagery. Okay, so good references to the text, but no reference to meter again, which is a must, really, I think, for AO2. I like the detailed reference to the text, though. And then at the end, in contrast, both Bronte and Blake see religion as prohibiting sexual passion. Yeah, I would just make the point that this is a satirical poem in the way that Donne is potentially laughing at the male speaker's pathetic attempt to get the woman into bed. All right, so that's your AO5. It's not just, Donne's this metaphysical poet who subjugates women, because that's the time it was written. He's a bit more intelligent than that, I'd like to think. Okay, then we go on to the next paragraph. A nice, once again, focus on the text, but a little bit descriptive, I've said here. Watch out for falling into this trap where you start just describing the text. Jane consistently battles with her own sense of sexual desire and her internal religious obligations when Jane realizes her passion for Mr. Rochester. After Bertha Mason attempts to murder him in his sleep, she learns of Blanche Ingram and her superiority in social class, accomplishments and beauty. Okay, well, that's not really analysis. That's just telling us what happened in the story. In response, Jane develops a kind of alternative alter ego to prohibit the development of her own feelings. Okay, well, now that's analysis. Okay, then we get a quote. Okay, furthermore, after hearing the description of Blanche as tall, fine, bust, olive complexion, dark and clear, Jane vows to draw portraits of both Blanche and herself as a reminder to curb any developing feelings for Rochester. Yeah, no, that's a fair point. So, all in all, good references to text, certainly showing an awareness of um, imagery in uh, in both poems so far. And then we're obviously moving on to the conclusion now. There are many elements of Jane's presentation that are compatible with Bronte herself. Oh, right, so we're bringing in the biography. Bit bolted on at the end. You should have done that throughout the analysis, but okay. So there's your AO3. It's just a bit bolted on. There are strong elements of the supernatural, which perhaps incorporated due to the strong sense of death which Bronte witnessed in her local town of Harworth. Yeah, okay. Biography again, AO3. You've managed that AO3 with John Donne, talk about being metaphysical. You could have talked about Blake being a romantic, and the fact that he was a Swedenborgian, not the usual form of Christianity, homeschooled, didn't, he was a born rebel that didn't believe in kind of man-made interpretation of religion. He went for the spirit in its kind of purest, rawest form. Okay, just remember that, and that's something they could have brought in as well. Ultimately, a sense of equality is achieved due to Jane's elevated status and Rochester's disability. I'm reading the next, the top paragraph, top right there. Overall, Blake and Bronte present religion as partly responsible for the oppression of passion. Good point. And as the main obstacle to be overcome, Donne's narrator, on the other hand, can only see passion as a way of justifying selfish and immoral intentions. It's good. That's good. That's an AO4 comparison. But like I say, uh, Don's narrator, yeah, beg your pardon, Don's narrator, they have said that. They have isolated the narrator rather than being Don. Um, and therefore, that makes that statement perfectly reasonable. Good. So there is a clear debate. I would try and sort of point out that satirical tone of Donne a little bit more. Um, but they've identified a debate there and a difference between Jane Eyre stroke Garden of Love and The Flea. And there's your AO5. So, yeah, I mean, the structure I put there in my scribble, bottom right, an intro to start with, an overview, it's good. Poem 1, reasonable. There could have been a lot more on methods. Prose, back to the prose, okay, and good references to text. Poem 2, um, yeah, once again, no mention of meter, but it's good reference to text. And then we're back to the prose, a little bit descriptive there, and then we finish with a conclusion. So it's a well-structured answer. Okay, this is what the examiner said. Sustains focus on the notion of passion. Don't forget its aspects of desire, which obviously we could interpret as passion. It's a cogent argument, in other words, a clear argument with valid links well supported. I'd agree. Interesting ideas explored with some confidence. Yeah, confidence. It's written fluently and the points are made. Okay, perhaps more needed on some points than on methods. Yeah, meter. Where's your meter? Okay, talk about the meter and its relevance. Talk about a little bit more in terms of AO3, the biography behind these. Talk about Blake's biography. Talk about John Donne's. Know about it. Okay, research it, and that Jane Eyre is applied at the end, but it's a little bit bolted on. Okay, but I would give it at least a high B on this one. This would be borderline B to A, but certainly not an A because of the lack of meter uh, and the lack of comment on biography that's relevant to the question, because it is. Um, okay, so let me finish with this question. In the literature of love, separation intensifies feelings of love. That's the only part you need to focus on, okay? Put a ring around that. Separation intensifies feelings of love. Separation intensifies feelings of love. Have a think about that one. I would give yourself 15 minutes and think how you could apply which two poems would you bring out and which and how would you apply it to the text you're thinking about. I'm going to think about Great Gatsby and two poems. Okay, so move on to the next video and we'll have a look at it.